Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast. It is episode 10. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest down in Texas, Adam Klink. Adam, how are you?
Joe, man, I'm great, man. It's great to be on this podcast. Finally, I know we've been trying to link this up for a little bit. Sorry for being kind of bogged up in work, but I'm happy to be here with you, man.
Now, you guys have a lot going on down there. And as they say, the best things are worth the wait. So we're here. People can't see you on the other end of the microphone, but you've got this awesome beard going on. And I'm super jealous because my facial hair is just, it's not a strength of mine. And I don't know if you can tell through the camera. I'm trying, man.
Well, I see the chin hair. I see that coming in. Like that's looking pretty solid. You just got to give it time. Like, how old are you?
So I'm 27.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't grow a solid beard until like my late 20s, so I think you have some hope.
All right, I'll give it 3 more years, but that's encouraging. So, I obviously know a lot about you through our work together through BPN, but pretend that people listening to this podcast don't know anything about you. I'm just going to give you the mic and just introduce yourself, whatever feels right.
All right. Well, thank you. I guess the most relevant piece of information that anybody cares about is like high school. I did athletics in high school growing up. I played a bunch of sports. I went off to college and played soccer for Rutgers University. And my whole life was very dedicated to fitness. I enjoyed fitness. I liked pushing myself. I liked seeing what I could become. It led me to be playing D1 soccer in college, but then that all got cut short due to too many concussions. I was a goalkeeper and got hit in the head one too many times. And because of that, I definitely went through some dark times, but it led me to CrossFit, which is what I was doing the past 8 years. I was competing, I was coaching, I was the head coach at a CrossFit gym. And then that ultimately led me to a job at Bear Performance Nutrition, which I'm sure we can talk about a little bit more in depth. But that's where I am currently in Austin, Texas. In March, my family, I have 2 young boys and my wife, Shay, we moved from Chesapeake, Virginia to Austin, Texas to join Nick Bear and BPN, and we've been absolutely loving it.
Awesome, man. That's a great introduction. We share Rutgers University in common. I did not play soccer at Rutgers. Actually, I've played maybe 5 games of competitive soccer in my entire life, and they all happened when I was 6 years old. So it was that thing where, at halftime, you have the lemon slices and every kid, you have them in your mouth like a mouthpiece. So
Yep.
that's my soccer experience. But, I think there are so many different directions that this conversation could go. And I definitely have a few talking points I want to touch on because you've done some really cool things and been through some pretty tough things. But I'm just going to get started by throwing this first question out there and we'll see where you take it.
Yeah.
So this podcast is about doing hard things and handling hard things well. Sometimes we get to choose those things and that's a privilege, but a lot of times life will give us hard things that we don't get to choose. And so in your lifetime, what is the hardest thing that you've had to handle that life has thrown at you that you haven't had a choice in the matter?
I have 2 things actually. One thing was something that was just, downright bad and that nobody should have to go through. And then one of the things was a positive that ended up being tougher than I thought it was going to be. So we can talk about the first one first. And it was actually coming up 2 years ago now. Shay and I, we were in our first house. We have our first son, Noah. He's 10 months old. And coming home from work one night, I was with both of them. We were at the gym and coming home, and it was a little before 6 p.m. So it got dark early. And we drove up to our house and it was pitch black. And we were very confused. We were like, why is all of our stuff on the front lawn? and we're like trying to process what's going on. Our front door is wide open, our dogs are barking, and it like hit us, and we're like, holy crap, we got robbed. And we didn't live in, it wasn't a seedy neighborhood or anything, but it was like by a mall. There was a bus stop at the one end of the street. Like people would like just kind of walk and cut through, but somebody was clearly staking our house out because we were only gone for maybe an hour and a half, like all of us, my whole family together at once, for the whole day. So clearly we were staked out. And my wife is all upset. I tell her to grab the dogs, first we called the cops because we didn't know if they were still in the house. They cleared the house, but she went to her mom's and I stayed. And man, when I walked in that house, it was like something out of a movie. I mean, it was pitch black, but like there was nowhere to step on the floor. We didn't live in a big house, but like the floor was just covered with our belongings. I mean, every drawer, pantry door, closet, dresser drawer, like absolutely everything we owned was on the floor. Like they just went through every single one of our belongings. The TV was ripped off the wall. All of our valuables, they like put in like our laundry baskets and put in the front yard. It was almost like it was being staged to be picked up by like a car, and we beat them to picking that up. So we actually didn't lose like our big valuable stuff, like my safe, and they put like all my shoes, car seats, things like that, TV. But man, it was like, it didn't seem like it was real life. But they hopped in through the back window. They never caught the person or two people, whatever it was. There were footsteps in our laundry room and on our washer and dryer. And I had some friends that came over and helped clean up the place because I didn't want Shay to see it. And we made the decision together, me and my wife, that like that was the last time we were gonna stay in that house just with a 10-month-old. We wanted to keep everybody safe. And so yeah, that was probably one of the hardest things to go through early in mine and Shay's marriage, because like we weren't ready to give up that house. So we bought that house and moved into it when we got married, and it was a small 1,400 square foot house that we like made our own, and we spent the weekend doing projects with, and like we love that place. And when something like that happens, is like your privacy is just invaded, and you don't feel like there, you just have this uneasy feeling about yourself. Like everybody just went through all of your stuff and had no regard for you as a person. And it was a really tough feeling. And it personally took me a long time to get over. I remember going back in that house, like cleaning up. And like the one day I just like broke down. Like, I don't know what was wrong with me. Like, it was just like, I didn't know how to handle it. So uncontrollable things that have happened to me and negatively, that was the one that always sticks out in my mind, and it was somewhat recent. The second thing that was tough in my life really, really recently, actually, we lived in Chesapeake, Virginia. My whole family lives in Virginia, not super close to us, but within driving distance. Shay's mom and dad live half a mile away. And we had, two young boys, and, family was a big part of their life. And I got this job at BPN. So we packed up and left everybody. And we moved with a 2.5-year-old and a 2-month-old. And we had this lifestyle where I worked at a gym, and I would work an early morning shift. So I was home at like 9 or 10 in the morning, and I was like home to help the rest of the afternoon. And I would typically go back for like 2 hours to coach another class or two. But like, I played a heavy hand in helping take care of the kids. My wife had a nice job where she worked like 30 hours a week. So she would work for a little bit of time, but we all kind of had like our shifts watching the kids. Everybody was helpful and lended a helping hand. And from that standpoint, in raising kids, it was, I don't want to say easy because raising kids isn't easy, but like in hindsight, it was easy. Then we get here to Texas, and we now have no family. We don't know too many people other than staff from BPN. And my job has now changed, where I'm gone from 7:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. And Shay's stuck at home with 2 kids and no help. And what I didn't realize in making that move is how tough that would be on my wife. And that was one of the biggest struggles that we went through the first few months of moving to Texas, was just the dynamic of me me feeling guilty for not helping, and Shay feeling like she's drowning and has no help and nobody to reach out to. And that definitely took a lot to get through. We're in a really good place now. And actually, since then, Shay's mom and dad moved down and they now live a mile away. So we have plenty of help now, and things are much, much better. But that was kind of like a unanticipated hard point in our marriage that it wasn't our control, but like we didn't see it coming. So I think it just kind of added up over the course of a few weeks of being here. And, my wife kind of just felt stranded. And I kind of felt helpless, and we just had to deal with it. So those are my two unexpected moments that were kind of out of my control that I've kind of had to get through in the past 2 years.
Thank you for sharing both of those.
Yeah.
I mean, the house, if you want to call it burglary or an invasion, I mean, that just like the word that pops into my head was just violation, and just feeling violated. And I can't imagine what that feels like, but the way you described it, I kind of had this like pit in my stomach the whole time. And I don't blame you. I don't think I would ever be able to sleep in a house where that happened, especially with a family. And, I don't have any children. My wife and I would love children someday, but I can't imagine that feeling of wanting security probably just is so amplified when now you're responsible for a small child, let alone you and your wife. And then, the second part of what you said with the move and everything with the marriage, I mean, I think that's one, really brave to talk about. And I think people need to talk about that stuff more. Being a married man myself, a little over a year and a half into it, I've realized that marriage is like the hardest thing I've done in life so far,
Not easy. Yeah.
And it's because, when you're in college or you're by yourself, like you can work out, you can be really selfish with your time, and it doesn't necessarily feel selfish. But then as soon as you are sharing your life so intimately with another person, it's like this mirror is held up and you just see all of these imperfections and selfish tendencies that you have, and you have to grapple with, like, how do I balance these things out and still be the person I want to be, do the things I want to do, but also like give and sacrifice part of myself for this other person? And how does that kind of balance out in a relationship? And so my question for you is, within the marriage dynamic, when you guys were going through that hard time, when you were working, long hours in the beginning and Shay didn't have that help, I mean, what were some of the things that you guys were experiencing? Like, what were you experiencing? Were you thinking about that while you were at work? Was that taking away from your energy in other places?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is like, I mean, this job I have, I'll say, is like a fun job, and I really enjoy it. And I almost felt guilty going to work. Right when I started this job, we kind of really hit the ground running with like being able to host people and take care of people. And like, that was my job. So, I mean, it was weekly. I was, on top of working the long hours, I was going out to dinner, taking people out to dinner, working late, going in early, going on trips. I mean, I think I went on 4 or 5 to 7 day trips within the first couple of months. And I just felt guilty. I think the guiltiest I ever felt is we had a team staycation over the weekend at Lake Travis, which was like 45 minutes away from our house. But I just remember driving away from my house to like selfishly go on this vacation, because again, I had been here for like 2 or 3 months. I felt like I needed to be a part of the team and show BPN I was bought in. But at the same time, I remember pulling out of my driveway, and I think I drove 2 or 3 miles, and I turned my car around and came home because I felt so guilty about leaving. And Shay took that in a way where like she didn't think I was trusting that she could do this on her own. And then that led to an argument, and I ended up going. But like the whole time I was there, like I couldn't think anything else except for my and my wife's relationship, and how at the end of the day, I just wanted to be there and help. And it was tough. It was really tough. So yeah, those were just some things that stick out of my mind early on. But yeah, I mean, the thing that helped us the most is just talking about it together, and mostly my wife speaking up, and me being receptive and listening. And even still, I feel like I can only do so much except for put all of my effort in at home while I'm at home.
Mm.
I heard a really good quote or saying from it was Josh Bridges, and he talked about when he became a dad, he had less time to do the things he wanted to do, but less time doesn't mean less effort.
Mm.
You can still put 100% effort into the hour you have to train now instead of 3 hours and be completely focused there. Then when it's time to go to work, you flip the switch, you're completely focused on work, and you put as much effort and energy into work. And then when you get home, you got to do the same thing and be able to flip work off and put 100% energy into your family. And I really try to incorporate that and follow that as best as I can. And I think that's what's made us so solid, and what makes my like family foundation so solid is I try to designate my time well. I leave at 4:30 from work, and I don't do any work. I flip my phone off. I even like made the decision, like, look, if you text me, I'll get back to you in the morning, like at 8 a.m. So those are some things that have helped us through this.
Yeah, that's great insight. I love that saying. And just the idea of focusing fully with intensity on what you're doing and maybe not even needing as much time. The other thing I will say is I am genuinely impressed with how responsive you are. We communicate, right? As an ambassador myself, like there are questions I have or things I'll reach out about. And I can't imagine, honestly, how many messages you get on a daily basis. And even if it's not the same day or even the next day, you always have gotten back to me. And you know what I find the most impressive? You send voice messages often, and I like that. And so I'll start sending voice messages back. I don't know how you respond to voice messages like 3 days later, because I'll forget 100% what the voice message said, but you're so good about it. And then the other thing too that I just wanted to touch on is you have the cutest kids I've ever seen. And when Noah was like really little and he was learning how to say words, your little Instagram story segment, Words with Noah, was just like the highlight of every day for me.
Well, one, thank you. I can't
Yeah.
take all that credit. That's mainly my wife. She made them cute. But be on the lookout, because Wyatt now is coming up on a year old. And so Words with Wyatt is on the horizon. So get ready for that.
Awesome. Well, I will link your Instagram below so people can follow along. But with that being said, right, we talked a little bit about effort, and I, from knowing your story, have two things that I think you might answer this next question with, but let me pose it and we'll see where you take it. The question is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose and why?
Yeah, I think you can probably pick those two things out. And I try to keep it like fairly recent. Like I can say that there are harder things I've done in high school and in college, but most recently was tackling my goal of being the first person to run a sub 5 minute mile and the 500-pound back squat. And then the second one was actually pacing Nick at Leadville and running, hiking, climbing 25 and a half miles. And I feel silly saying that Leadville was like one of the hardest things that I've done in my life, because Nick ran 4 times as much as I did, but it was one of the hardest things I've done in my life.
I mean, after seeing the premiere and listening to the question and answer session, I learned way more about you. Honestly, I feel like in that 30-40 minute question and answer session than I had in the year previous. But why don't you start with the Leadville thing and explain it like somebody listening has no idea what happened?
Yeah. So Nick likes to do these crazy challenges. And most recently, they've become these endurance challenges. He's done Ironmans, he's done a marathon. And his most recent feat is doing Leadville 100. He got selected to do that. So he and the team decided that this was going to be a team effort. And we wanted to showcase what it takes to run Leadville 100. And we wanted to showcase the BPN family and how everybody had a role to accomplish this goal. And my role in that was, in the beginning, help at the crew stations, the aid stations, and take care of Nick however we needed to take care of him. But then at the 68-mile mark, my role became to be his pacer for 25 and a half miles. And I've never done any endurance events. I mean, like the mile was my claim to fame, which is a sprint compared to even, a marathon or 100 miles. So definitely out of my element, but I wasn't unfamiliar with doing hard things. I think as a CrossFitter, and that's how I trained the past 8 years of my life, like you learn how to do hard things and you do a bunch of hard things and you learn how to tolerate pain. And so I felt like I was well equipped to do whatever I needed to do for Nick. And that meant being a pacer. The team felt that I was the best person to pace Nick out of the people that we had on the team. And my background in running, I like to run. I've been a good runner. I've been fast. I won fitness tests as a goalie growing up as a kid. I run a fast mile, but like I've never run more than 10 miles in my life. And I think I only ran 10 miles like once in my life. And after that, it's been like in the 5 or 6 mile range would be like a long run for me. So I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that I was going to do whatever I needed to do to aid Nick. And I think my role changed even throughout like the 25 miles. It started off kind of like just keeping the energy high, finding his pace and learning to like, I need to like somewhat feed off of him. Like I'm not in this selfishly to run my race because this guy's already run 68 miles. Like he doesn't want to run right here. I know I want to run, but right now we need to just like pace ourselves and climb. And I just need to like keep him going, keep his spirits high, keep him motivated. And man, as we went, like it turned into, all right, now we're like, I'm actually here making sure he's staying safe because he's having trouble breathing and making sure he doesn't end up on the side of the mountain. I mean, there was one point where we were so cold after this one checkpoint in the field, we were just like, we were shivering and our teeth were chattering uncontrollably. And we had to deal with situations like that. And the last, geez, I think it was the last like 2 miles. I think he was getting a little bit like, not incoherent, but he was just like losing his sense of time. And just, I remember we were like trekking down this mountain and you have 220-pound dudes trying to like navigate our way down these rocks. My headlamp went out. So it was one headlamp, 2 people. But he's like, I don't think he knew how long we were going because it was like every 30 seconds, he'd be like, how much further we have? I'd be like, 1.75 miles to the next checkpoint. How much time we got left? How long we got? Nick, 1.73 miles. Like we literally haven't like, and it was like, but it was like constant. So I played a lot of roles in that 25 miles. But for me physically, I just remember like how bad my joints and my hips and my back were just hurting more than they ever have in their life. And like, you can deal with that pain. Like I know how to deal with pain and I could deal with that pain, but pain up there with the worst that I've had as far as that. But hardest part was the last mile. I got altitude sickness and I was really starting to feel dizzy and lightheaded and nauseous. And I just remember doing everything I could to hold it together to get him to this next checkpoint and guide him there. And then we got there and I was still trying to stay strong. I was like, Nick is 8 miles in. I can't show that I'm hurting. And we forgot Nick's trekking poles for that aid station and he needed them. So that checkpoint took longer than anticipated. And I just got to a point, like we were maybe there like 8-10 minutes and I just had to like sit down. And I remember like my world just like closed in around me. And Nick finally went off and I was in rough shape. I mean, it took me 20 minutes to walk to the car, which I mean was maybe only a quarter mile away. In the car, we had to pull over. I was throwing up. So it hit me pretty hard. And I mean, I think that's something that like you can't really control other than like being out in elevation and being able to train that, which we didn't. We're in Texas. It's not very high here like that. Maybe that was out of my control, but the way I felt those 25 and a half miles was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Man, if anybody is listening to this and hasn't watched the More Than the Miles documentary, 100% would recommend. And in that documentary, there's that moment where the camera is on you when you are in that seat and you could just see like all the life almost just like gets sucked out of your body and you just are, it all hit you. And I think it's so interesting. And to tie this back into marriage, even, it's amazing how you could be so strong for somebody else when somebody else needs you. And then as soon as that's done, right, all that exhaustion hits, but you can pull that strength from deep down inside. And I thought it was cool to watch you do that.
Dude, how weird is that concept? And you saying that, it like made me think about that. Like if I were just to go out and do 25 and a half miles on that mountain, I guarantee you it would have been that fast, even if I was like trying, but like, because you're there for somebody else. No, that's a really good point you bring up.
Yeah, it's amazing what community could do for people. And especially when you have other people who are relying on you, it's just amazing how much we can tap into that other person that's inside that can just do a little bit more, that can give a little bit more, that could be a little bit more. And it's super powerful. And so to transition to a little bit of a shorter event for you that was challenging, which, by the way, I have attempted a sub 5-minute mile, not succeeded. I'm about 28 seconds away. I have not ever gotten anywhere close to a 500-pound back squat. This is ridiculously impressive. So just take us through the thought process of how this even became a thing for you.
Sure. So in the CrossFit community, if you get your level 1, which is the certification to be a coach, but people who aren't coaches still get the certification, they have this, the first seminar is like, what is CrossFit? And they talk about like, what exactly is CrossFit, the methodology and the concept behind it. And they give an example at one point of the marathon runner who can run a 2-hour marathon and the power lifter who can squat 1,000 pounds. And they take both ends of the spectrum and they're like, look, we're not trying to be either of those people. We're trying to be proficient at everything. And we want to be that person who can squat 500 pounds and run a 5-minute mile. So that's like where this concept came from, because again, they just kind of took the two extremes, picked something in the middle, and those nice round numbers became kind of this challenge. And they always had a name for the guy who could run the 2-hour marathon because somebody's done it. They have a name for the guy who could squat 1,000 pounds because somebody's done it. And they never had a name for the 5 and 500 because nobody had ever done it, which I'll circle back on. But in 2018, Dave Castro, who's the director of the CrossFit Games, he wrote a book. And in the book, he was talking with another athlete, like wondering if anybody at the CrossFit Games could even do it. And the consensus was like, no, I don't think anybody could. Some names have been thrown around. So it kind of became like this challenge in the CrossFit world. And with my background, when I played soccer, even though I was a goalkeeper, I was very fast. And I'd actually run a sub 5-minute mile in high school. So I've done it before. I've been there. And then training at CrossFit Krypton with Ben, we squatted a lot. And I've always had some good leg strength. And I had built my back squat up to be able to hit a 500-pound back squat. Now, my 5-minute mile and my 500-pound back squat at this time were 10 years apart. I ran the mile when I was 16. First time I hit 500 pounds, I was 26. This challenge comes out and I'm like, well, let's see if I can put this together. And I actually tried it once in 2018 and I failed. I got close, but I failed. I got injured. I got bad plantar fasciitis. So I shut it down, trained for the next CrossFit season and moved along with my life. But then COVID comes around and everybody has competitions lined up, canceled, no game season. So now everybody's at home. Most of us can't even go to the gym. And it's like, oh, well, what do we do? So I was like, you know what? Let me give this challenge a try again, because I have a squat rack in my garage. I can run anywhere. It's easily accessible. I don't even have to go to the gym to train. So like, let's put some work in and let's see how close I can get. So I still did my normal CrossFit training and I would run Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning. I would squat Tuesday, Thursday in the morning. And I kind of just added that extra session into my training. But I always did it first thing so I could put all of my effort into that session. And then with my excess energy, I would do, my other training session throughout the day. And maybe I didn't put as much effort into that, but I was still training. And I did like a test to see, I was like, I'm going to run a 90% effort mile and see how I feel and see how close. And I think I ran like a 5:13 and I was like, all right, I think I can hit this. So 2 weeks later, I attempted it again. I had a pacer when I ran, but being a bigger guy and now circling back to like, what are the hardest things you've willingly done. That mile was hands down the hardest thing athletically that I've done in my life up until then. And it gives you an appreciation of like how fast people are who run a 4-minute mile, because the effort it takes to shave 3 or 4 seconds off a lap for 4 laps is unreal. And the faster you are, the harder that is. But I mean, I just remember like selling my soul that last lap to try to hit this mile, and I accomplished it. The back squat was less of an issue for me. I was pretty confident there, so I was able to then hit the back squat and kind of write my name, and I guess you could say like the CrossFit record books. But now circling back, that's CrossFit level 1 certification. Now there's a name for the 5 and 500, which is actually in the course, which is pretty cool. Like the week after, I know people on the seminar staff, and they had like sent me a picture of the board with my name up there. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is incredible. Oh, that's so cool. Well, let me ask you this. Logistically on the day, how far apart were the back squat and the mile?
So I ran the mile, I think it was around like 9:30 in the morning, and I squatted at 4 p.m. So I took some good time, but like I had a kid, like I think I mowed the lawn in between there and played with my kid, and like
just casual.
I just like lived my life. I didn't like, I know professional athletes probably would have taken that a little bit differently, but I just gave it some time, got 2 good meals in between, and just felt ready to squat.
Yeah. What was the time for the mile?
4:56.
Wow. Okay. And now I'm assuming people are gunning for that, right?
Sure. Yeah. So now this has become a challenge where like people try all the time. 2 people have hit it since me. One in the UK and I think another guy in the US. But I've put out my training since then with the hopes just that people will set a goal for themselves. And it doesn't have to be the 5 and 500. And I specifically like preach, like, you're not going to squat 5 and 500 pounds, but like maybe it's a 6-minute mile and a 400-pound back squat. Maybe it's like pick an attainable goal. And I'm all about like setting goals for yourself. I train the best and I feel the best when I'm working towards a goal. And I want to encourage people to do the same. So like my biggest hope in me doing all of that is just to encourage people to set goals and to work hard at something and to try to make yourself better than you were a couple weeks or a couple months ago. Like I never did that back squat and mile, like quote for the fame. Like it blew up because I think it was perfect timing because there was nothing going on in the world of sports, like literally nothing. And so it was like just something the CrossFit community could be like, look what we did. Like this happened while nothing else was happening. And like, it like probably took off more than like, if it happened right now, like I probably wouldn't receive the credibility that it's gained me, but it's really weird that like just something that I did for myself has really set my life in motion to where it is now. It's wild. It's crazy where my life has taken me since then.
Do you think you'd be at BPN if you hadn't hit the 500-pound back squat in 5 minutes?
I honestly don't think so. And I can briefly touch on that journey. So being a semi-professional athlete in the CrossFit space, and being a coach, supplements were important to me because I couldn't always get a meal. Supplements are also expensive. So if I could take that off, like that burden off my family's plate, spending money on supplements, I was going to do that. So I was looking for a supplement sponsor, and I had gone between a few companies, and around that time, BPN was starting their ambassador program, and they approached me with becoming an ambassador, and 2 other supplement companies offered to take me on as an athlete and pay me and give me free products. And I was like, I'm an athlete, I'm going to get sponsored. But like, there was something that was tugging at me with BPN where I was like, if I don't get on board, like I'm gonna miss something. Like something's happening here that I need to be a part of. Don't know what it is yet. Like there were no ambassadors. There was no program. And I was like, but it's like, I need to be a part of this company. Something's happening here. So I became a BPN ambassador, and I was one of the first 12 or 14 ambassadors. And then I hit that mile and back squat when nothing else was going on. It blew up. it very much aligned with what Nick was doing as a hybrid athlete. I was doing very well in the ambassador program. So everything, like all the pieces were there, and they ended up then signing me as an athlete. So they signed me as an athlete because of this feat. Mm-hmm. I would not have been signed as an athlete if it was not for this achievement, right? So Nick had me down for like an athlete weekend, which was the first one that they've really done. I was like the guinea pig, and I spent the weekend with them. It was awesome. I loved it. And the weekend after I got back, Nick FaceTimed me and asked what my price tag was. Like, it was absolutely never my intent to work for BPN. Like, I had a great job. I was the head coach at one of the most prolific CrossFit gyms in the country. Like, people would kill for the job that I had there. And I remember Nick asking me, and we had just moved into a new house 3 months ago. And Shay and I looked at each other, and I remember we were sitting up on the steps the one night and being like, we just moved here. Like, this house is like our dream house. It's in the school district we want to put our kids through school in. It's a perfect school. Like, we're half a mile from your family. Like, and Shay said, well, we have to go. And like, that was that. Like, so yeah, the rest is history. They offered me a job to be the partnership manager. And I think they wrestled with where they were going to put me. Nick always says he knows when he finds the right people that they have to be a part of the team. Sometimes he doesn't know where they're fit. And at first he thought I was going to be like their exercise guru, their trainer, putting out content, workout videos, tips, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think, and he's told me what he's seen is in working with the gym, my job wasn't coaching, it was building relationships, right? As a coach, you build relationships. And I think that's where he saw me fit in here. And that's why I'm doing what I do now, is just building relationships within BPN. So super thankful to be here. It's changed my family's life.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch from the outside, and from the other end of the relationship side of things, I can say that, yeah, 100%, you're an amazing fit for this position. And I'm grateful to be able to know you and to have you on the podcast and so much more. But, I want to touch on one thing you said real quick, because I think it's something a lot of people struggle with, and it's the goal setting piece of things. So to me, goals are super, super important because they give direction. However, I also think that for some people, goals can be a bad thing at some time, right? Because goals mean that there's something that you can fall short of. And I think sometimes when people get so fixated on goals, they become outcome oriented, and they could lose sight of the value of the process. And so for you, my question is, have you ever set a lofty goal and not achieved it? And if so, what was it, and what did you do next? And maybe the answer is no. I don't know. Maybe you've achieved everything you've set out for.
No, I mean, I've set out plenty of goals, and I've fallen short more times than I can count. And a quick example that I already talked about was trying the 5 and 500 previously, and I fell short. I set out, my goal was to make the CrossFit Games every year. I fell short the stage before 9 years in a row now. Right. So like I fail essentially more than I succeed. And this is all coming for a full circle, because on the ambassador call last night, we actually talked about goals and setting goals and micro goals. And like, we actually talked about the concept too, that picking yourself up from succeed after you succeed is just as important as picking yourself up from failing. And that can be a whole other conversation. But what I encourage people to do is, like, yes, I set out that big goal to hit that 5 and 500. But along the way, I always set these micro goals with whatever I'm doing. And they're like these small checkpoints or smaller goals that are maybe anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks to even a couple of months sometimes, that I can kind of check off my list and are still setting me in motion towards that bigger goal. And even if I fall short of that bigger goal, well, hey, I hit this little goal and this goal and this goal and this goal and this goal. And like, that's amazing. And that's something I talked about on our ambassador call last night, because we had a person there who's been feeling like they've been setting back. And instead of saying like, oh, I got to get back to this, like, no, like, just like, let's chip away at it. Like, I gave the analogy there was a point, and Nick and I were 20 miles into my portion of pacing Nick, and we had climbed for miles and miles and miles already, and like it was 2 a.m. and we were exhausted. And I remember we get to this point and we round the corner and we look straight up, and it literally looks like a ski slope, and we were like, how are we going to get up this thing? Like, this is unbelievable. But you know what? We took it in 20-yard increments. We went 20 yards, we stopped, we caught our breath, we rested, we went 20 yards, we went 20 yards. And then before we knew it, we looked down, we were halfway up, and then we kept going, and then we were at the top. And I think it's just a more realistic way to approach goals, by setting, again, these micro goals. Like, for example, Nick wanted to run a sub 3-hour marathon. Well, along the way, he set a micro goal to run a sub 5-minute mile. He set a micro goal to hit a sub 20-minute 5K. And so he's now accomplished all these other tasks and feat. And if he would have fallen short on the 3-hour marathon, I think he would have been a lot more content than if he only set out for that and that was the end all be all.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think I don't want to give my answer to this next question away, so maybe I'll just hold this back. I'm going to have to bite my tongue here, but let me ask you this question.
Okay.
What does the word endurance mean to you?
The word endurance for me means consistency. And I do apply that to more than just the athletic part of my life. I apply that to my family life, my time spent with my wife, my time spent with my kids, my time at my job. And that if you have a good endurance, you're consistent. People know what they're getting. And it's like that mindset of like just showing up every day, doing the work to the best of your effort, loving people how you should, and then repeating that and just being the same person day in, day out. And again, you can apply that to all areas of your life.
Yeah, I agree. And what I was going to say is, with that image of you and Nick climbing that last big steep incline, there were points where you guys were resting, where you weren't actively moving forward. But I think to me, endurance is it's in your head, right? You might not be physically moving forward in life. You might actually be falling short or falling down or taking a step back, but it's that forward motion in your mind, that willingness to be consistent, to be persistent, to try again. I think that's what endurance is. And there's this quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it goes, resilience is endurance with direction. And I think if you can pair a strong purpose and direction for your life with an enduring mindset, with consistency and persistence, I mean, that's resilience. And no matter how many times you fall short of a goal or fall down or get knocked down, whatever it is, you can keep moving forward, and it's powerful. And so with that being said, I have a final question that I like to ask guests here on the podcast. And this one's special to me. And I'll just tell a little story. When I first came across Nick's content, which was years ago now, I don't even remember what year it was. He was on YouTube, and I had this conversation with him on the other podcast that I run. And his content wasn't great. I mean, he was like making bowls of oatmeal in a microwave in a dorm room in Korea, and he was filming it. But there was something about him that was just captivating. And I admired the way he carried himself and continued watching. And his content pulled me out of a dark place in my life at the time. I was really struggling. And I think conversations like this have a funny way of reaching people who really need them. And so that's why I have this question. And the question is, for somebody on the other end of this podcast who's listening, who's in a dark season of life, who's going through something really hard, who maybe doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope or a bright side that they can look to, what advice or what guidance would you give to that person, or just what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it kind of circles back to my advice on setting a goal for yourself, because I think once you set that goal, you start to make actionable steps towards getting out of whatever you're getting out of whatever you're stuck in and moving towards a different point in your life. I'm a big supporter of building habits also, and starting to build habits. I think people that are in dark places can either build negative habits, or they don't have any habits at all, and they're just kind of like floating through life. But I think once you start to build habits, intentional habits. They're hard at first, but in building a habit, you do them repeatedly until they almost just become what's expected or what's normal in your life now. And then you build new habits and you start to pile those on top of each other. And that can really set your life in motion in the direction you want it to go. It's tough. And I never want to tell anybody like it's easy to get out of a dark time. But I think if you can start to develop habits, some discipline, and set some goals in your life and set micro goals along the way, I think you can pull yourself out of anything. And that's how I've pulled myself out of certain times in my life.
That's great advice. And just to look at that in a different way, I think a lot of times we think that to get out of a dark place or to move forward, we have to think about things or we have to talk about things. And both of those things are important, but sometimes you can change the way you feel by acting more often than not. And it's super powerful. And I think a simple example is if you want to be a nicer person or more kind, instead of just thinking about it, like go hold a door, like go send somebody a nice message. Like instead of thinking you want to be that kind of person, just go start doing it. And then you will eventually become that person. And I think the same goes for anything we're chasing in life. So with that being said, Adam, I want to be respectful of your time and just want to thank you so much again for taking the time to have this conversation and for all that you do. If people want to connect with you or follow you and kind of stay in touch with your journey, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. I keep it simple. My handles are all just at Adam Klink. I take pride in getting back to people, even though if it hasn't been as quick as it was before, just as this position's evolved, but I'll definitely get back to you.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And Adam, thank you again. If you're listening to this podcast and you want to connect with Adam, shoot him a message, follow along. And I can genuinely just express that you won't be disappointed with more of Adam in your life. So thanks again, Adam.
Thanks, Jim.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh, and one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.